Go. Okay. All right. Welcome to the City of Maplewood Housing and Economic Development Commission meeting for Thursday, October 17th. Thank you for your patience, those of you who watch us live, both of you. It is 6:07, and I will call the meeting to order. First thing we'll do is a roll call. We'll start on my left.
Brian Finley.
Mark Jenkins.
Daryl Henshin.
Dennis Hungert.
That gives us 4 members, which gives us a quorum, which is why we're starting just a little late. We wanted to make sure we had quorum for tonight's agenda of items. With the roll call, we will move to approval of agenda. Does anyone have any additions or changes or questions on the agenda as presented? No?
No.
Okay, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Commissioner Finley, make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Let's have a motion from Commissioner Finley. Do I have a second?
I second.
Have a second from Commissioner Henshin. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes ayes all. And we will move on to the minutes. I want to double check my notes. Nope, I was good on that. Any questions, changes, observations on the minutes from our meeting of July 18th? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Commissioner Finley makes a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
We have a motion by Commissioner Finley. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Unger. With a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Ayes all. With that, we will move into new business. And I'm going to interject a little bit. New business for those of you watching or sitting up at the dais. Jeff, I think this is your first meeting leading us.
It is.
As our staff liaison. So, Jeff, if you want to take just a little second before you jump into A, just tell us and the viewership a little bit about you.
Sure, to the 2 people.
The 2 who are watching live.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jeff Thompson. I apologize, I started in May, so beginning of May is when I started as the Community Development Director here in Maplewood. I apologize, I wasn't at your July meeting. It was just before I started, a pre-planned vacation, so I was disappointed I couldn't make it, but I'm happy to be here tonight. A bit of background, been in the community development field and economic development field for 12 years. Prior to coming to Maplewood, I was in Wayzata as their planning and building director for about 3.5 years. Smaller town, about 4,500 people, but very active in development. So got a broad range of experience there in all sorts of different types of community economic development projects. Before that, I was in Minnetonka, the city of Minnetonka, for about 10 years, doing, again, the same work in community and economic development. So happy to be here in Maplewood and the exciting things that are happening here, and certainly to be a resource to you as a commission, but also to the community and including the business and residents of the community to help us move us forth on a lot of the great plans and visions that have been put forward recently. So I'm happy to be here.
Cool. Glad to have you.
Thanks.
So what do we have for item A?
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. So a little bit later on in the agenda, I'll give a brief update on the Council's adoption of the rental housing licensing program. The short summary of that is they did adopt in September the ordinance establishing a new rental housing licensing requirement and program in Maplewood starting next year in 2020.
The goal, and I know that ordinance has been reviewed at your commission before the council's adoption, and you were involved in that. So you know that there are really three primary goals associated with the rental licensing program. One, to provide kind of clean, safe, and good housing for renters in the community. The second is to provide safe and secure housing from a crime prevention standpoint. And then probably the third goal is kind of overall neighborhood stability throughout the community, recognizing that a lot of our rental properties are integrated into existing neighborhoods. So when the council adopted the ordinance, that establishes kind of the framework for the program. But one of the key components of the program that's certainly common to rental licensing programs is a city inspection program. So as part of the licensing, the city will be inspecting all of the rental dwelling units in the community on a cycle, on a schedule that we will establish. And largely the focus of that is to ensure that those units are just abiding by our city codes. The two primary focuses of that are going to be the fire code, ensuring that the fire prevention standards are being met, and second is just around property maintenance, that they are complying with the city's property maintenance code. And today we actually do have a property maintenance code. And what's unique to Maplewood is that we actually have our own code. So a lot of times communities will adopt kind of existing property maintenance codes, but I don't know the exact data, and don't have all the great historical knowledge yet. But we for some time have had our kind of own independently written maintenance code that is unique because it is our own, but also it's unique because it distinguishes between rental units and owner-occupied units and actually provides different standards. It's a code we are familiar with because our building inspectors and our code enforcement staff enforce that across the board on all those properties. And, we've had certainly some challenges with it. It's not the most clear, concise, kind of easy to enforce. And so the city has been looking at kind of rescinding those existing regulations and adopting a more known standard, which is the International Property Maintenance Code. It's a code that is developed by the International Code Council. And they are the same body that kind of adopts both the building codes that people are familiar with in construction, as well as the fire codes. So it's an international code. They have annual conventions to kind of bring all practitioners and professionals in the field to the table to kind of review the code, see what's working, what's not working, and provide updates to it. So it has a real comprehensive approach to it, has a good institution of kind of tweaking it and updating it. And is also one of the benefits to the community is it provides, other communities use it. So when I was in Wayzata, we had adopted the International Property Maintenance Code. So for rental property owners that own properties in other communities, it's something that they could be more familiar with and provide some consistency of regulation across the city. And then just from an administration standpoint, because it's written by code professionals and updated regularly, if we need to take enforcement action or to enforce the code, it becomes a lot easier to do that. And certainly as we progress along enforcement, it's a much better tool for the city to use. So that's the general framework. From a policy perspective, we're just trying to provide kind of clear, specific, and consistent regulations to help us better administer the rental licensing program. And ultimately, that results in owners being able to better understand what the codes are and what our expectations are as we move into the inspection process. So I did provide in your packet just a copy of the city's existing ordinance, so you can kind of see what our existing property maintenance regulations are. And I did put, the full ICMP in there as well, just so you could get an understanding of the framework of the sections and what some of the requirements are. You'll see a lot of overlap between them. So I can certainly attempt to answer any kind of technical questions you have of it, but I think the intention here was to give a more policy-level conversation and discussion from HEDC around the proposal to do this. Ultimately, it would require an ordinance amendment of our city code, so we would bring that ordinance amendment to the council to rescind the existing regulations and adopt this in its place. So we're looking for just discussion and any feedback you may have on the code, and ultimately a motion for a recommendation to the council for their action on that adoption. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any commissioners? You turned on your mic. Did you have something in mind?
Figured there'd be something said. Yeah, Commissioner Finley, I just echo, I think it's great to be consistent with other cities. I think that standardization carries a lot of convenience for the property owners, to lessen the burden on them. So I do like that. I also like the fact that when it's in, if the city gets sued over an issue, this is something that's recognized international, not just U.S. And so these issues have been thought through and probably discussed in legal terms multiple times. So it protects the city a little bit more. So I like it.
Cool.
I just have a few questions, but one, administratively, this is updated regularly, is it annually, and what would be the process would then the city look at those updates on an annual basis?
Yeah, Chair and Commission, correct. They are, so I think I put the 2018 code in your packet. This is actually kind of the second version of the 2018 code, so I think they make more minor tweaks on an annual basis to the overall code, and then I don't think there's a regular pattern, but every so many years, they actually kind of recodify and kind of do a more comprehensive review of it and update it. Yes, as if there is, I would say if we adopt the 2018 code, those kind of minor tweaks that happen on an annual basis, we wouldn't have to re-adopt. But when there's kind of the recodification of the larger code, we would then need to amend our ordinance to review it and make sure that's still consistent with our objectives, and then adopt that new code. It's the same process we would follow for the building code.
And is the intent at this point to adopt it in its entirety?
Correct.
Okay. And then I think just my final question is, it talks about the benefits of this. Are there any, I guess, detriment, anything that is of concern of adopting this, in your opinion?
Chair and Commissioners, no, not as we've reviewed it. We haven't seen any concerns in the actual regulations of something that would be a concern to us. We did look at the, there is an appendix in here, so we can adopt the code, and in the building code, there are many appendix, but here there's only one. Looking at it, it looks like it's largely non-applicable. It's about kind of boarding of windows along the ground floor, so we probably won't look to adopt that appendix. So that's the only thing we saw in there that probably is not applicable to Maplewood.
I just had a similar question too, since it's a model, international model, it does get adopted in full without any, does anybody go through and make tweaks to it, changes? I would think with something, if it's international, there's going to be a lot of items that are not going to be applicable to our climate, our demographics,
Sure. Chair and Commission, we've actually gone through it and haven't identified anything that we think we need to not adopt as part of the code, because it references the things that are more climate specific are really in the energy code, and it really adopts that by reference. And so we've adopted the energy code as part of our other existing codes. So any tweaks that are in our ordinance today that relate to a more specific climate would kind of carry through, since this doesn't specifically reference the energy code. So again, we haven't seen anything in these existing regulations that would kind of see that we would want to not adopt those particular sections, which we could, but we haven't identified what they are. But certainly if there are things you see in there that maybe we should look at, we'd certainly be willing to do that.
So on that subject, I'm going to jump to you. There are a number of sections, though, where the code actually says jurisdiction, I don't know, basically the jurisdiction sets the number. The height of weeds, stuff like that.
Yep.
I'm assuming staff has gone through or will go through and select what their values are for any of those items in that regard. So there is some change to how we read it here today.
Sure, correct. We would certainly do that and look to the existing code for consistency and what we've enforced, or use kind of what we've seen in the field as we've been dealing with any sort of property maintenance issues.
Okay.
Commissioner Finley, question is related to, we had a city customized code. We're adopting now the international code. That means they're not exactly the same. And so my question's around that issue of the differences between the two. I did not pull up the existing and go through line by line to cross-reference, but I mean, is there concern of confusion this may create at current property owner, renter that's been doing this for some time and now we're switching? Do they need to be concerned that, we're switching up the rules on them? I mean, is there anything that stands out that does the city need to do any extra communication on this because of some significant change, do you feel?
Yeah, good question, Chair and Commissioners. I would say a couple things. One, I think we will look at, of course, as we wrap up our, take it to the council, we'll certainly go through it again and make sure that there's nothing conflicting between what we have been doing and what this says. I would say I'm not terribly concerned that there's a lot of concern about switching the regulations midstream, just because our enforcement has been so limited, because it's been on a complaint basis, and we haven't been doing proactive inspections of housing units of rental or owner occupied. So it's not like there's a lot of people are familiar with what our regulations are. It'd be only those that we've gone through an enforcement process with. But fair enough that we would want to communicate out to people that this is the direction we're going in terms of our code.
So actually, I have a comment alongside that. Because the international code is much more inclusive, there actually are a number of items in the international code that weren't addressed in the city code. So my questions were similar to Commissioner Finley's in that, and I'll take the one example I looked up. If you park a vehicle that's inoperable in your backyard in Maplewood, there's no code to say whether or not you need to yank it or you have so much time to remove it, but the international code does. Are we looking at, to Mr. Finley's point, are we looking at some communication to say, hey, heads up, as of January 1, July 1, whatever the initiation date is, these codes are going into effect, and if so, can we build in some amount of time to say, okay, we're going to notify you January 1st that it goes into effect July, or 30 or 60 days heads up, not just to go, January 1st, we're going to start doing this, and your car is frozen in a snowbank in the backyard, and you're not going to get it out till May or June. Just how, has the city considered that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's fair. I don't think we've considered those specific details yet about how we communicate it once it gets adopted. Because if you look at the larger rental ordinance, there's a lot of communication we need to do to get the word out that the license is going to be required and what that entails. So we've, it's in our mind, what that communication will look like, but until we get more details about how the program will operate and how this code will impact the city, we can certainly be more strategic about how we address the communication piece.
And to the rental part of it, in the policy issue piece in our packet, it talks about well-maintained rental properties, but this code as written applies to owner-occupied as well as rental properties. So I think we need to be clear, we're talking about a code for all properties, not just rental properties in the city, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Questions or? Yeah, I think from my standpoint, I support it, but I support it with a huge caveat I didn't read it cover to cover. I can sleep on a plane without reading this, but hey, maybe I'll take it along next time. But I didn't read it cover to cover, but there were some things I looked for that I knew we had gaps in, and this certainly is much more complete. I would ask the city to seriously consider some type of a communication tool. Certainly with the rental housing, you'll have plenty of communications that this can dovetail onto pretty easily. But for owner-occupied homes, are we going to use this for our business properties as well? Because this can apply to those, but I think we have separate maintenance codes for businesses.
Correct. So yeah, this is, there's more comprehensive zoning regulations around kind of business operations pieces. But certainly some of the general provisions around long grass and more nuisance-related issues, would apply to businesses as well.
Okay. So yeah, I'd just ask that the city, keep serious consideration on how do we notify residents and businesses, and what kind of a lead time are we going to give them? At this time of year, we may seriously think about saying by the time we put this together and communicate it, some of these things legitimately may not be amendable until the spring. But I'll let you guys read it cover to cover and figure out which items those are.
Sure.
Any other thoughts?
Where's this at in the process? Are they just beginning to explore it, or are they ready to move on it and vote on it, or?
On the maintenance code itself, this is kind of one of our, our building inspection staff have, they're familiar with it. They actually reference it. I mean, they've actually had copies in their office that they reference just to kind of provide direction on our property maintenance standards. That doesn't mean we enforce it if it's not consistent with our code. So they've been relying on it, so they're somewhat familiar with it. They've reviewed it. We wanted to bring it to this commission first to get any feedback, and I expect our goal would be to get it adopted by the council by the end of the year, so that it's effective in the time that we roll out the licensing program in 2020. Because that's when inspections will start on rental properties is in 2020.
Do we have a target date for implementation on that?
We do. So the target, the policy that we've talked about is starting in 2020, all rental units will be required to be licensed. So that would include multifamily properties as well as single family. We going from 0 to 60 and having not licensing and inspecting to having to inspect and license them. Our program is next year, so in 2020 we would inspect all the multifamily properties. So I think it's 90 properties and about 4,400 units. So we'd focus on that in year 1. And then in years 2 and 3, so 2021 and 2022, we'd inspect half of the single family homes in each of those years. So it's a 3-year rollout of inspections for all the units in the city. And then once they're initially inspected, they'd be put into a schedule around 1 to 3 years. So if you're based on your code compliance history and our enforcement records, the poorer performing properties would be inspected every year, and then the ones that are performing better and addressing any issues wouldn't be inspected until every 3rd year.
So just so single-family rental owners don't think they can just kick back for 2 years, complaints, other issues may warrant an
Absolutely.
an unscheduled, not unscheduled, but you would inspect those properties if you get complaints or have
Absolutely.
reason to do so.
Absolutely.
Which is how it is today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but without the licensing, so that's the thing.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, were you being aloof? You didn't give me a date. When do we, a date for the
When in
rental
2020?
20? Yeah, are we going to kick off the licensure January 1,
Oh, sure.
July
So,
1?
yeah, I got it.
December
We don't
28th?
have this, we don't, I was probably being aloof because we don't have a specific date. The ordinance becomes effective January 1st, so that they have to, the ordinance goes into place, they need to be licensed in 2020. We haven't rolled out, we need to hire staff, get the program logistics figured out. We'll communicate more once we know the specific dates on when people need to come in and submit their application.
Because that, of course, will help then say what is the priority on this, the International Maintenance Code.
Correct.
As well. Okay,
Correct.
cool. Does that help? For everyone else? Good?
Good.
Should we go on to B?
I think, Chair, on this one, we are actually looking for a motion.
Oh, that's right.
Actual
You are.
action. Yep.
Okay, so
Commissioner Finley makes a motion to approve the International Property Maintenance Code.
we have a motion to approve, I guess I would say, for us to recommend
Yeah, Rick.
to City Council
Thank
to amend the property maintenance regulations to adopt the International Property Maintenance Code. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
And we have a second by Commissioner Unger. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. The motion passes ayes all. All right, now we'll move on to B.
Chair and Commissioners, thank you. Just did want to do a brief update on the business outreach for this year. That's part of our business retention, expansion, and attraction efforts that we do in partnership with the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. You talked about this at your last meeting as well, but we are largely wrapping up those outreach events. So we target 15 to 20 businesses on an annual basis. This is the 3rd year we've been doing it. We have completed 14 of those business visits so far. And the last ones we're trying to coordinate are really in conjunction with the Rice-Larpenter Alliance. So as you may know, the city is a partner with cities of Roseville, St. Paul, Ramsey County about kind of the future vision of the Rice-Larpenter area, and has hired the St. Paul Chamber, a different division, to kind of lead that alliance. And they've been doing business outreach as part of that work. And so there were two businesses in Rice Larpenteur that they were looking to reach out to, AgriPure and Western Bank. And so in the next couple weeks, we don't have the final date set, but sometime in early November, we expect to have some outreach events with them, the city, the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Rice Larpenteur Alliance, to kind of bring our efforts together. So those are kind of the last two outstanding before we'll compile the report with some of the findings and kind of feedback that we received from the businesses, and then certainly bring that back to you for consideration, any sort of kind of response or next steps on any of that feedback received. So certainly willing to take any feedback that the commission has about the visits you've been at, but we're looking to wrap that up soon.
Commissioners, thoughts?
Excited to see it coming, getting wrapped up. I think it's been a very successful program. Looking forward to doing it next year.
Absolutely. I just wanted to clarify the piece from the packet. Under policy issue, it says the city has signed an agreement, blah, blah, blah. Is that a 2020 agreement we have signed on again for 2020?
No, that's actually the 19 agreement.
So that we're referencing the 19 agreement?
Correct.
Which begs the question then, when do we look to, or whether we will sign an agreement for 2020?
Yes, I think this year we did it around May, so
Okay.
April or May is when we signed the agreement with the chamber. Certainly would be interested in your feedback now or as the report gets adopted, but I know from the city's perspective, we find it very valuable. Both as just it's so important for the city being out talking to businesses on kind of a proactive basis. The hardest part of that is actually getting your foot in the door with the businesses. It takes a tremendous amount of legwork. So to have the chamber kind of use their networks and their connections and not have this like, why does the city want to come into my business perspective? It's a really effective way to get in there to have those conversations. I think there's ways we can improve it, to maybe ask some different questions and get at some different business issues that are impacting Maplewood. But from my perspective, it's a great tool for the city to be doing.
Commissioner Unger, your thoughts? Should we do it again?
Oh, I'm all for it, yep. I think it's been really positive.
I would agree.
And I think we just heard from Commissioner Finley. Yeah, I agree too. I'm going to say just a couple notes, I think, where we could do better next year. And I know there was some change in personnel managing the program this year, but we did have some businesses that were revisited. One was a little awkward to go in and revisit them after they'd already told us they were moving the last time. So just, making sure we're hitting new businesses. There are some, as the program talks about, there are some core businesses. We want to get that pulse every year. How are things going? But just trying to make sure we continue to hit new businesses. But yeah, I know from days gone by with Mr. Martin that, yeah, it's a pain in the butt to try to get a business to let us stop by and visit. So thank you very much to the chamber. And yes, you get an overwhelming yes from me on continuing the program.
Chair, the only additional thing I would add is I think it would be helpful as we kind of move forward on some of the other efforts that we're doing is to think about how we can continually engage those businesses that we have outreached. I get that we don't want to go out and do a BRE and a visit for every business every year, but having that connection with those businesses then is a great tool for on our communication around awards, state of the city, future things we're doing. It's a great thing we need to kind of remember to leverage as we move forward.
The CIP.
Yeah.
Lots of that data went into formulating the CIP. So yeah, absolutely.
So I have a thought on, I don't know how much you're doing and we're just not aware of it. You probably are doing it. I think it's extremely valuable to obviously to meet with the businesses themselves and obviously want to see that continued. But above and beyond that, I don't know how much you're doing in meeting with property developers, commercial developers, business managers, that the side that's kind of getting the feedback from those that are out there selling Maplewood, right? Can you say something about that?
Sure can. Sure, Chair and Commission, it's appropriate. I was going to bring it up at a later part in the agenda. So a couple things. One, we have met with some kind of key properties in the north end as part of the North End Vision Plan, meeting with the Birch Run property owner and Sears Seritage, specifically around their sites, to kind of let them know what we're doing around the north end. We are, as we think about the north end, we think about Gladstone, the London Lane property, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is a property the city owns. We have actually, just today, we're chatting about doing some developer forums around kind of using, developers that I know from my past work, the developers that have done work in Maplewood before, connecting with Ellers, our financial advisor, who also is connected to the developer community, to do one-on-one meetings with developers to kind of show them sites, give them the specifics around what we're doing, how we're being proactive around visioning. That's on our list to do 3 or 4 of those before the end of this year, and then continue those into next year. So I agree it's a key thing to get interest in development in those key areas.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Cool. Ready for item C?
2020 Business Awards, and I apologize if I'm getting the terms not right on all this stuff. I'm still learning all the branding of the past efforts of HEDC in the city. But I know every year, as part of the State of the City, the HEDC does the Business Awards. And so the State of the City has been scheduled. It's scheduled for January 16th. During the lunch hour, so it's kind of a luncheon event where it's combined with a presentation from the mayor about the state of the city and what accomplished in 2019 and what will be happening in 2020. We're also looking at tying it into a message around engagement around youth. So a lot of what the school districts are doing and engaging the youth community in their larger efforts. The speaker hasn't been identified yet, but that's kind of the first draft of what the message would be. And then as part of that, at that event is when the awards would be presented. So I think in the past couple years, there have been 3 award categories: entrepreneurship, innovation, and growth, environmental sustainability, and community contributions. I put the descriptions of those in your packet.
So we've activated the nomination page on our website, so it's there under those 3 categories. But tonight we're just looking for really 3 things: any tweaks or changes you have to those award categories, to any sort of direction on the nomination process or how we kind of garner interest in nominations. And then third, I think in years past you've appointed a subcommittee to review them and either select 2 for the full commission or for them to actually select the award winners, just kind of what process you want to follow to select those awards. Just noting, you could do up to 3 easier because there wouldn't be a quorum, so we wouldn't have to worry about public notice as long as there was only 3 people on the subcommittee. Right. And then Commissioner Kachuk did email me saying she was interested if we did establish a subcommittee to serve on that committee. So
Okay.
with that, that's for your discussion.
Let's start with the 3 award categories. I'll confess I'm a little torn that we might be spreading it a little thin with that many categories, but what's everyone else's thought? Commissioner Finley.
I don't know if I have enough insight to warrant a really strong opinion one way or the other. The advantage, the more awards, the more you're spreading out the good news, the joy, the happy feeling, I mean, businesses appreciate being recognized.
Yep.
So having 3 awards versus 1, that would be the plus side.
Yep.
I don't think it's a ton of extra work for us to do 3 awards versus 1 award. And I think it kind of fits into the city's goals. I mean, like we have, one of the awards is, I don't know the terminology, but it's along the environmental green.
Environmental Sustainability Award.
Thank you, environmental sustainability, that's the name of it. So that kind of fits in with, some of the city goals. So that's my take on it.
I didn't have any specific concerns. I think the 3 awards seemed pretty self-explanatory, and I can see, some businesses fitting into each one and why we'd want to recognize them separately. So it seemed appropriate to me.
Commissioner Unger?
How many years have we been doing this?
I want to say this is 4 or 5? 4,
Yeah,
I think.
somewhere in there.
I see what you're saying. I think the hope had been that as more people see what we're doing and there's more buy-in, that there'd be more companies nominated,
Right.
more. The first year or two, it was difficult because some people were nominated for 3 categories and so. But hopefully, we might not have enough history yet to make that determination, but the hope is that there's more buy-in now and there'll be more nominations because of the people been involved. And so hopefully we'll see that. I don't know if anybody's nominated anyone yet online, but we probably need to do a better job of
I think
promoting
we'll,
processing the awards and getting the nominations.
well, now that we know the page is turned on, and yeah, I think all 3 awards are absolutely commendable, and we do have businesses in the community that, excel in those areas. My concern has been we haven't had the engagement I would have liked to have us seen, so, if you own a business out there, or you know someone who has a business in Maplewood, and you think they're, a beacon of entrepreneurship or environmental sustainability or contribute to the community, try to overwork us. Try to get us to have to, put in some hours in weeding through all of the great businesses in Maplewood. Because one of my goals on this commission has been for the last decade is we've got great businesses in Maplewood, but pardon my language, we sort of suck at singing our own praises as a city and as a business community. So come on, get out there and start talking up your favorite restaurant, your dentist. Maplewood business doesn't always have to be a hospital or a multinational corporation. It can be your insurance agent just off of White Bear Avenue. So please, let us know who they are. We want to recognize them. But yeah, we have businesses that meet all 3 of those, that excel in each of those 3 areas. So let us know who you think they are. And to city staff, now might be a good time to, put it in the Maplewood, in the newsletter, and, maybe if we can get a banner up on the city's feed before or after our meetings, or just, interspersed in and amongst that, that'd be great.
I think it'd be good to talk to like the St. Paul Chamber and maybe like the Oakdale area chamber and some of those organizations where our Maplewood businesses are participants in, but
Yeah, and I think as a member of those organizations, we may have some perks as a member to put something into their newsletters and on their website, so.
This Commissioner Finley, if I can tie this back to our previous topic, when I think about when I've been on business visits, this topic never came up.
That's a good point.
I guess we have to thoughtfully think about how to implement that, but just off the top of my head, I mean, like, maybe we just proactively bring it up to the businesses while talking to them. If that, for some reason, doesn't seem right, then we could have, at the end of the meeting, as we walked out, and, we could have just said, hey, so which one of the 3 categories do you think this business would fit into? And then we could, and then circle back. So I don't know, it might make sense to just be proactive up front and ask them, hey, which one of these 3 would you want to be considered for? Is one of these 3 of interest? Or I think it might prompt a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Mr. Thompson, if we can put that, like a recommendation to the chamber to put that in their question template, maybe as part of our introduction. We visited some of our award winners this year, I know. So, and, the comments were, wow, we really appreciated the recognition. When was the last time you were at a city event? Oh, it was, the State of the City a year or 2 ago. So, yeah, great point. So on the categories, let's stick with all 3. Let's promote the heck out of this. Subcommittee, so we know Commissioner Tkachuk is interested. Any other 1 or 2 of you folks here, or do we just volunteer the 2 absent? Well, no, actually just Mr. Dupuy, because Joy's already absent. She's already volunteered. One or two of the people here at the front interested in getting together? I think in the past years, it's been one time reading through. I did it last year. You know, we just went through the nominees and went through it, but what,
I've done it a few times, so I'm game, but if someone else wants to sit on it. I think we also did a little bit with our meeting schedule changing. I think we went to giving the subcommittee a little bit more authority in choosing, because we
Actually,
didn't
I
have
think
another
we-
meeting to come back. We won't have another meeting in time to name
Right.
it, so we kind of,
so I think, yeah, because I think we met, the last time we met to whittle it down, but we felt really comfortable in the choices that we sort of said, this is our one recommendation. I don't remember if we emailed or did a
I don't remember
vote,
either.
but
Mike might have.
But I'd be comfortable with the subcommittee selecting a winner too, unless they want to come to us for a tiebreaker or that type of thing. One of the things too, I know would be the case with me, I'd be more than happy to participate, depending on the date you pick and, you know, whether I'm traveling or not. So you can throw me in, but I would say I may or may not be able to attend depending on the date. What about you, Mr. Hinchin? What are your thoughts? Would you love to jump in?
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to participate too. I should be pretty open, but depending on the date, but yeah, I'm
Get
open to that.
a new voice into the process. So at least Commissioner Tuchuk and Commissioner Hinchin, and then I don't know if you want, well, wait, a third,
Commissioner Unger said yes?
oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So that's three?
So, and Commissioner Unger, we'll go with those. If for some reason one of those three can't make it, yeah, maybe you just send a note out to the rest of the
Yeah, one of us would be,
members.
I'd be happy to serve as a
I
backup
think
or
any
whatever.
of us would be willing to step up if we have that date available.
Sounds good.
Cool. Sorry, my cold is. All right. Any other feedback, commission recommendation? Oh,
Do we need to decide if the subcommittee's going to make the decision or bring it back to the commission, or does that need to happen tonight, or?
it's not anything that needs a motion, but I would say if we just want to, you know, amongst the four of us, I'm comfortable letting those three make the choice.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Finley is,
Yep.
Commissioner Unger, are you comfortable with that?
That's fine.
Again, I would say, you know, for staff, I don't think it needs a motion, but you've got a unanimous agreement on,
That the subcommittee would make the decision, yeah.
yeah, on the commission that we're comfortable with the subcommittee making that call. And again, if for some reason they're torn and three of them, you know, are split even, you know, fine,
math?
bring it to us, because there's probably a bigger issue than a split vote when it's three people, so.
Can do.
All right. Want to move on to D. And I think this is the one I was poking you in the ribs on earlier. I think this is what we normally called our business engagement event.
Business engagement. Good to know. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. So, I got my notes. Oh, here it is. So I know in past years, around this time of the year, there has been a business engagement breakfast. It's usually been done around the breakfast hour, which kind of coincides to when the Maplewood Business Council meetings have been. We've been kind of chatting with the mayor and Brian Smith as well, one of the council members, just kind of about what this event may look like. And one of the recommendations that came out of last year was maybe to change it up a little bit in terms of the time frame and the time of day, I should say, and when it's held. And then at the same time, we were out at the Unison Banquet Hall and Restaurant Center as part of our business outreach, the BRE&A visit, and they are very interested in kind of engaging with the city on potential events. So what kind of brewed out of that was doing a kind of networking happy hour at the Unison Banquet Hall and Event Center, which can kind of tie into their business and the some of the business connections that they have, and then kind of using that as a unique event to kind of bring people in to recognize that asset that the city now has for the community, but also kind of switch it up at a different time of day and when people may be more apt to come for a cocktail. So that's kind of the idea that's out there. We haven't finalized the date on it yet. I actually just got a call this afternoon from the owner of it. So we'll finalize the date on it and get more details out to you, but just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that that's the direction we've been heading, and if there's feedback on that or any other event logistics, we're happy to
Are we still
You're right.
looking at having a little bit of a program
Yeah.
to,
Yep.
I think the mayor has usually spoken.
Correct. Yeah, there would certainly still, it wouldn't just be like a networking event just to come and hang out and have a drink. Yeah, there would certainly be kind of a program around trying to engage the business community in whatever message with the mayor. And I know in past years, that's when we've done our business outreach kind of summary feedback from the chamber. So whether that's still a
Right,
component
right.
or not, we'll certainly look at that.
And then timing, maybe late afternoon. We don't want to go too late.
No, yeah.
Because 5 o'clock comes.
Yep.
Some people will be happy to stay there till 9.
Yeah.
And some people wouldn't even come if it was
Yeah.
that late. So,
Yeah, we're thinking, we haven't again set the time, but 3:30, 3:30, 4, something like that.
Cool. Okay. Other thoughts on that concept?
It's worth a try.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm cool with mixing it up. It's not a big formal event. We want it to be a opportunity for Maplewood businesses to hear from the city and get to mingle and network with each other. And one of the challenges I think we have had in the mornings is there's a lot of people when the program is over just pack up and head out. So your only real networking is maybe a half hour beforehand. And in this case, people can continue to network until they do decide they want to head out. So,
Right.
cool. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. So it looks like we're all in agreement. Let's go ahead and see what you can put together for us.
Sounds good, thanks.
All right. With that, that brings us to the end of new business. Moving on to item 6, unfinished business, there's none. Item 7, visitor presentations. It's the same cast in the chairs that we have every night, so that answer is none. There's no one here, sorry. For commission presentations, we'll go back to Mr. Thompson on business engagement on city construction projects. Sure.
So Chair and Commissioner, I know Commissioner Finley and I had a phone call a couple weeks ago and talked about just adding this as the agenda for discussion, and also certainly for giving you an update of kind of what we do around business engagement for construction. So, the city is no stranger to the fact that construction is disruptive. And we know that for sure for residents and for businesses as construction happens outside their business. I've chatted with our Public Works Director, because largely the construction projects are kind of managed by our Public Works staff and our engineering staff. And we are proactive about engaging the full community, so residents and businesses that are adjacent to, near, or impacted by construction that may be happening in the community. So some of the things we do, we notify the business engagement. The business notification happens with residents. So anyone that's, again, impacted by the project, we send them notice before the project's been designed and approved and it's finalized, just to give them a heads up about the project, what the timeline is. And certainly soliciting any sort of input or feedback we hear from the community, and then adjusting those plans and the timelines and anything that can go into construction to the best we can as part of trying to still achieve the project, adjusting that to kind of address any concerns that we hear. Understanding that it's difficult to eliminate kind of all impacts that may happen on residents or businesses. So I know specifically one project that's come up is the Frost Avenue construction. The current project has been going on through the duration of the summer, and on the west end, there are businesses on that road, but particularly on the west end, where Borchert's and the bakery and some other tenants are kind of right near the English intersection. that project, actually, the entire phasing that the city ended up doing on it, so that is a city construction project. The phasing on that project was all dictated or not primarily dictated by the feedback we heard from the businesses. So the typical approach would be to, that project went from White Bear all the way to English, would be to tear up the street all at once, kind of build it all at once to kind of be most efficient. But we knew that the length of that would have tremendous impacts on the access of those businesses. So although the road was under construction, the west portion of it that was most right in front of those businesses was actually postponed to the very end. So as soon as the project was wrapped up, so that they could tighten that construction area the best they could to limit the amount of time that those businesses didn't have direct access on the public street. Aside from that, I know as part of the project, I was out there on National Night Out. Borchards had a great event. There were a bunch of events kind of in that area. So the Public Works Director and I went out, we chatted with them, checked how things were going. There was a city inspector that was assigned to the project that was in regular communication with the business. We worked with them specifically on detour signage. That it's critical, so we did kind of adjust some detour signs that weren't working. And then lastly, our communications department did some kind of proactive messaging on our communication channels on the website and social media, just letting the community know that businesses are out there, they're still open, and encouraging them to support them during the tough time of construction. So we know we did the best we can, to assist with them. We know it's not everything we can do to have no impact on the business, but it's certainly part of our construction planning. We know that we need to engage the community and address any of the concerns the best we can. So mostly just wanted to provide the update. If there's questions or feedback, we're happy to take that back.
Any comments from other commissioners?
I'll just say, again, thank you. I think it's important that we do have that conversation so that we're aware, because we're out in the community and people are, I was hearing, comments and feedback, and I was pretty aware, I knew some of it, and I just wanted to get the word out that, yeah, there is a strong effort by the city where we are aware of the negative impact that these projects can have, and there's obviously a lot of sensitivity to it and trying to minimize the negative impact. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want to share my observations too. When on the business retention meetings, years ago, we met with Nolan's when Stillwater Boulevard was under construction right in front of their shop. And I remember the manager talking about the project manager would stop in on occasion when he was on site. He just said communication with the city was great. And the only time we had a negative, there was a business on White Bear Avenue, and they had a little bit of a negative, but we put them in touch with the county because that wasn't a city project. And we looked good because we still took care of them. So, yeah, no, to staff and, to the Public Works guys, keep it up. You're good representations of the city to our businesses, so thank you.
The other thing that just came into my mind, I think Commissioner Kachuk was at the, not to keep pitching the business outreach, but
Yeah, we can
when
keep
we
pitching
when
it.
we
We love
were
it.
out at Hill Murray, we were there like in the middle of the summer, and the signs were up that Larpenteur was going to be under construction, and the principal, when we were meeting with him, said, I haven't heard anything, and school's starting soon, and when's this project going to happen? And there's kind of he was really nervous about it, and we didn't know that, so when we got back, we just contacted the county and connected them. They were actually able to move the project up. I still think, unfortunately, it hit during their opening of school, so it still had some significant impacts, but it was one of those efforts where, the business outreach really went far to know that there was an issue that we could address by just connecting them with Ramsey County and trying to get that project adjusted accordingly, so.
Right. Cool. All righty, thank you. Okay, that takes us to staff presentations. And that goes right back to you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So I think I've largely covered the points I wanted to. Just again, to reiterate, the council did adopt the rental housing ordinance on September 23rd. It's effective next year. We've talked about the inspections. Just a couple updates since you saw it. I put the final ordinance in your packet just so you had that for going forward, just so you know what the final version was. I guess they're not minor, but two changes that were made by the council since you saw it. One, they're really related on housing access and equity. So the requirement for landlords to conduct a credit check was removed from the ordinance, just because, again, when our issues are housing maintenance, safety, and neighborhood stability, we didn't see the direct nexus to the credit check requirement, so we struck that, or the council didn't adopt that. And then second, of course, they have to do it, but we added a provision that essentially says that applicants have to comply with the Fair Housing Act. Again, they have to, but it was just important to call out that, there was concerns, some discussion around what is the background check, when landlords have to conduct a background check on their tenants, does that potentially result in displacement or issues with access to housing, ensuring that those decisions are around legal matters, that they're not around issues of discrimination for protected classes. So what also flew out of that was the direction from the council that we also educate on the Fair Housing Act as part of our, training to landlords that may be less familiar with some of their requirements, that we can incorporate training around the Fair Housing Act to make people aware of that as they go through our licensing program. So that's it. Again, no action. I just wanted to give that update that that's been adopted, and as we've talked about, we'll be rolling that out next year. And happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
I guess I just have a comment. I just want to commend the council. I think taking out the credit component was, in my mind, the right thing to do. I'm happy to see that. The only other comment I have is on the criminal background check. I see that they have to do it. They don't have to do anything with that. I guess I just like to put out there that I hope that there's some communication that there should be an effort to make sure everyone has a place to live and to take into account, even though they may have a criminal background, to consider not putting barriers up to renting to them. And that's an important aspect to the community, to make sure everyone has, a safe place to live, so.
Certainly.
Okay. I think with that, we can go on to 9B.
9B. I'll work on my titles as we go forward. This is a little bit broader than, as I was putting it together, a little bit more broad than just the EDA and Head C bus tour. I know at your last meeting, you talked about the enabling ordinance for the Economic Development Authority and the council's kind of combining the powers of the EDA and the HRA into the Maplewood Economic Development Authority. So council did adopt that ordinance and recognized as part of that there's still a role, an important role for Head C to play. It wasn't ever the intention of that would take away the duties of Head C and not continue as an important advisory role around economic development, housing, and business. So they did adopt that. They had their first organizational meeting last Monday, this Monday, a couple days ago, as part of on Monday night. And it was entirely organizational. So they were electing officers, appointing people, adopting the bylaws, approving the budget, establishing their meeting schedule, pretty fundamental things. Just a couple follow-ups from your discussion at your last meeting. I know there was a conversation around your meeting schedule, like the Head C's meeting schedule. So they didn't set a specific schedule for the Economic Development Authority. I think both boards recognize that this is going to be an evolving process. It's going to take a while to kind of understand what all the EDA is going to work on and therefore how frequently they need to meet. I got the general consensus that the EDA was going to set their meeting schedule at the beginning of the year of 2020 for quarterly meetings. And ultimately what I think that means is we can then work on the Head C meetings to also be quarterly as it currently is, but to coincide that they're a couple weeks before the Economic Development Authority meeting so that you're seeing those items, making recommendations, and then kind of shortly thereafter they kind of roll to the Economic Development Authority. So I think the schedules can marry quite well. And again, as things change, if the EDA wants to meet more frequently, we can revisit that with the Head C about whether you also want to then change your meeting schedule to meet on a more regular basis. That all being said, they did set 2 meetings upcoming for kind of the initial legwork around visioning and kind of strategic planning for the EDA and Head C. So the first is a bus tour. It would be a combined bus tour of the EDA and Head C on November 16th. Be a half-day morning. Again, times haven't been set, but we're looking like 8:30 in the morning to noon. Maybe add a lunch on at the end.
That's a Saturday, I believe,
That
right?
is a Saturday, correct. The tour, we're going to go to 3 destinations or 3 cities. We're going to go to Richfield, St. Louis Park, and Robbinsdale. So those are the 3 cities we'll be going to. Those are 3 communities that have very active economic development authorities that have been kind of working for years on economic development projects. And so we just want to get out there and take a look at those projects. We'll provide some background on kind of the history, the deals, how they came to fruition, what the process was, what tools those cities used to create some of those economic development projects. We're going to go in the order of Richfield, St. Louis Park, then Robbinsdale, some conversation whether we have lunch in Robbinsdale at the end, and then we'll come back to City Hall. The second then is, to follow that up is a joint meeting of HEDC and the EDA to kind of do some mini strategic planning, and they set that for November 25th at 4 p.m. And I can send an email to everybody, so everybody has these on these calendars, their calendars as well.
You said 4 p.m.?
4 p.m., yep, on November 25th here at City Hall. And the goal of that is just to, you saw the projects, you have some background on kind of what we are doing today, and then start to do some, strategic planning around, okay, what do we want to be working on going forward in terms of business development, economic development, and housing.
And so then just to clarify, that's on city council meeting night, so that would be prior to their workshop?
Correct.
Prior to the
We
meeting?
wouldn't do a workshop that evening between
Oh, this would be,
4 to 7 probably is when they would do that joint meeting. 4 to 6:45.
probably more to 6 something, and
Yeah.
then they can grab a quick dinner before they go.
Yeah,
in.
there might be, might be food at the meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll
okay.
see. That's what I heard.
We can find out how fancy schmancy the council eats after, after workshop,
And
in
be
the 15
disappointed by
minutes they
that.
give themselves. Yeah.
So the attorney reminded me today, our city attorney, Ron Beatty, did remind us that because these are special meetings, the HEDC, with the HEDC, the EDA called for the special meetings, but we also need the HEDC to call for these 2 special meetings. So we could probably be done by a motion tonight for special meetings, again, on November 16th at 8:30 here at City Hall for a bus tour, and then Monday, November 25th, 4 p.m. here at City Hall for the joint meeting of HEDC and the Economic Development Authority.
So first thoughts, November 16th. I know, and I met with staff and the mayor and Councilmember Smith. The bus tour is not a requirement. It's not going to be a formal meeting, but if you're available, hey, come on, let's see what other cities are doing. I know some of you have had your phones out. What does the 16th look like? Is that, looks workable?
Commissioner Finley's
potentially
interested,
for
yes.
Yeah,
Mr. Finley?
I believe I'm open.
Commissioner Henshin and,
Tentative,
what?
tentative.
Tentative, got it. Okay, so, I don't think we need well, we can do it by motion. I'm not sure we require it, but since we've got it here, is everyone, actually, let's do this. Would someone like to make a motion?
Commissioner Finley would like to make a motion that we have special meetings, for lack of a better term, on November 16th, which is a Saturday morning, meeting here at City Hall at 8:30 a.m. for the bus tour to St. Louis Park, Robbinsdale, Bloomington. And then the other meeting, I thought I wrote it down.
So let's go with the 16th first.
Yeah, okay, we'll do two
And just-
separate motions. That's my motion.
Can I ask you to drop off the meeting here necessarily, right?
We'll be starting here.
Oh, we will be
Bus
starting
tour
here.
starts here and then
Okay,
goes out
I
to
was
the 3
just, I didn't know
cities.
if you had said that or if we were going to meet somewhere else. Okay, cool. So we've got a motion for the bus tour on the 16th. Do we have a second?
I second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Finley. We have a second by Commissioner Henshin. All those in favor of requesting a special meeting, a formal special meeting for November 16th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes ayes all. And then for Monday, the 25th at 4 p.m., everyone check their schedules, look good, comfortable with making a motion on that one?
Commissioner Finley would like to make a motion that we have a special meeting on Monday, November 25th at 4 p.m. here at City Hall with the EDA.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Finley, a second by Commissioner Unger. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nays? Motion passes ayes all. So I honestly don't ever recall having to do a motion for a bus tour, but you now have an official motion for a bus tour.
There we go.
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
We're
covered.
covering our tail ends here is what
Exactly.
we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other items of note for those two engagements? Or
Not for those meeting dates, no.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to 9C.
So quickly, just to summarize, a couple of the development projects that we're working on, these again, we're more focused on the economic development projects. So if there are more kind of broader questions of development projects, I'm happy to answer them. Two projects of note. One, we are working with Sherman Associates. They're the developer that developed the first two phases of the Frost English project on the northwest corner of Frost and English. The third phase is a just under 9,000 square foot single-story retail building on the far eastern side of that site, so right on the northwest corner of that intersection. They have submitted their land use application, so their zoning approvals are working their way through the Planning Commission and council process now. I think I forget if this happened before your last meeting, but the city council did approve a term sheet with them around some city financing for that project. So there's two components of it. One, there is a financial gap in the project, just as a relate to the amount of construction costs, land acquisition for the building. They acquired the liquor store building, the liquor store property. They also acquired the assets of the liquor business. And so with that and just the cost of redevelopment, they're requesting a loan from the city, a repayable loan from the city in the amount of $477,000, and then also incorporating that property into the tax increment district for Frost English, to also provide some tax increment redevelopment dollars, and that's up to $600,000 for that project. So the council did approve a term sheet, just a preliminary term sheet with the developer outlining kind of those terms. Ultimately, that'll all be codified in a redevelopment agreement with Sherman Associates. We have, I think they're close on the application, but we don't actually have the TIF application from them yet. But we would certainly bring that to Head C once we have the final version of a redevelopment agreement before that goes on to what I think now might be going to the Economic Development Authority, since they will be the body for approval of redevelopment agreements.
I know this is normally presentation, but can I ask a couple questions on that?
Yeah.
When the TIF district was created initially, that piece of property wasn't part of the TIF district, is my understanding, for, was it population density reasons? I'm curious, or was it just that the owner, I mean, because you can create a TIF district larger than what we did. I'm trying to remember, do you know why the TIF district omitted that piece of property?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if there was a technical reason behind it,
Right.
or if it was. I suspect it was just.
So we're actually creating, so my reason was, we're actually creating a new TIF district. We're not bringing them into an existing TIF district.
It's to be determined. I think we might bring them into the existing district, and we could qualify to do that because the five-year construction rule is through October of next year, and so there's probably not a significant difference in.
But we're still expanding the
Yes.
existing one. We're not
Yes.
moving their property. We're not going in, taking the building and going, put it in the parking lot so it's in the district.
Oh, yeah,
We're still
no.
expanding that
Correct.
district to include that land no matter what.
Correct.
Whatever legal methods you use.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I mean, I know that's been part of the conversation for years.
Yep.
On that, getting that to happen, so.
Yep.
Okay, I guess
Okay.
that's it.
Yep, no, it's fine. The second thing we're working on is the city owns a property out on London Lane. It's just south of Lower Afton, kind of the intersection of London Lane and Lower Afton. It's a former fire station site. It's been on the market for some time. You probably know this. There was back in June an exclusive rights agreement with the city from a developer to negotiate a purchase agreement. Ultimately, we didn't come to terms with that developer, so we have been working to kind of market the site out to the development community. It's one of the sites we've talked about doing a development roundtable around. We may not need to do that because we're actually talking to a couple developers right now that have significant interest in a housing project on that site. So we expect hopefully to have the deal around a purchase agreement in the next month or so to move forward with the sale of that land for a high density. So that was re-guided in the new comp plan to high density residential. So that's all the projects are looking at a high density multifamily project on that site. That what it would be is kind of unknown until the council kind of agrees to the purchase agreement. So just an update on that site.
Commissioner Finley, did you have a question?
Not on that.
No, okay. So hold on. I do have a question on that. I drive by that property every morning. One of the challenges in the past to development was remediation of the soil, because it was a fire training, they had fire facility there. We also know there's a pipeline nearby. Have those issues come up, and has the city addressed how they would address those items?
They have not. The specific issues haven't come up. Again, the developers are probably just looking at the site from just a visual perspective.
Okay.
We presume
We'll get into that at
I
later
presume
time.
any purchase agreement would be contingent on them doing their due diligence of a phase 1 environmental site assessment to flush any of those issues out before they were to close on it.
Okay,
But we're not aware of any, substantial contamination that would inhibit redevelopment of that site.
okay. Well, it's been vacant for a long time, so let's see what we can do. That'd
For
be great.
sure. For sure. The third thing I just want to talk about was the North End Vision Plan. That plan was adopted, and then shortly after that, we won an award from the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, one of their local government innovations award around land use and planning. So good to be recognized for that work from the chamber. I know the HEDC was very involved in that visioning project. So give you an update on that.
Yeah.
We are working on the zoning code amendments, just to implement the vision in terms of a zoning perspective and development perspective. And then, as I've mentioned, we are still talking to the Birch Run property owners and the Sears owners, Seritage, about how key their sites are to creating kind of the initial development that's consistent with that vision. So again, they are interested in, particularly the Birch Run site is one we've talked to them about, including that site in the developer roundtables that we would do. As has been talked about, they own that property. They're an asset manager. That's what they do, is manage existing assets. They're not a developer, and so they would potentially be looking for a development partner to assist them in any sort of redevelopment of that site. So trying to connect them with maybe some potential developers that would be interested. And that's all I have for my development update, but I can certainly answer, I hope I can answer any questions about other developments happening in
Oh,
Maplewood.
we'll find out. No. Commissioner Finley?
Okay, so update on, I'll say rumor mill for lack of a better word. There's a better way to describe it, but there is some talk of a hotel potentially being of interest in the North End. Is that kind of far off into the future, or is that potentially in the next year?
The hotel project that I think was more immediate has not been moving forward at a very rapid pace. We did have a meeting with another hotel developer not related to that project as well at all, for a different site of another extended stay hotel concept in the North End area. Great. And they did tell us it was directly related to the market around the hospital and patients that are visiting the hospital for an extended period of time. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then another question about a completely different location on Wiper Avenue near Aldridge Arena. Used to be Junior Achievement.
Yep.
Could you tell me anything about that? It's no longer Junior Achievement.
No, in fact,
And there's a new business
you
there.
you just approved the city to use that property earlier
Yeah, I
in this
know,
meeting.
but I just-
Okay, I didn't know if you were asking or doing a setup there.
I only made the connection because I've driven by there and I read the sign. And
Yeah.
could you just
Yeah.
just say something briefly about that?
Sure. So that is the new look. The full building, well, there are some tenant spaces in there now that I think about it. The building is occupied by Unison, banquet hall and restaurant. So it's a event center huge event center. It hosts a lot of people. And then on the south side of the building, where that entrance is actually the entrance to a restaurant. I think it's Thai. I think it might be a Thai restaurant, if I remember what they told me correctly. And then there's some other tenants kind of in the southeast corner of the building. But the main tenant is a banquet hall that holds larger events for the community. And then this restaurant up front that's open to the public as well.
I've only driven by a couple times, but didn't stop. I mean, is this restaurant open or will be opening? And same with the event center, open, will be opening?
I think it will be open very soon. If not, it opened this week. I don't know if they told us the exact, sometimes restaurants do soft openings of
Yeah.
when they're open and to the public. I know it's imminent. They were finishing the touches when we were out there about 2 weeks ago.
All right.
But they have held several events out there. In fact, I think that item on the wall was actually a gift to the city from their grand opening event that the mayor attended. And I think they had the royal family there, so prince and princess that were there from.
So for those of you
From Laos,
on
so-
camera, I don't know if our camera can show it, but there's a decorative and ornamental piece by the staff and council members' entrance into the city council chambers.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think it was quite the event when they did the grand opening ribbon cutting for the community.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was State of the City or the Business Engagement Breakfast. I actually sat with some of them and promised them when they were open, we'd go check it out.
Sure.
And give it a try. So we're anxious to
Sure,
see when they're open and try them out.
sure. On that note, the other visit that we did on Saturday was the grand opening in the Nepali kitchen at Rice Larpenter in the
Okay.
northeast corner. They're now open for lunch and dinner as well. So
Nice,
plug-in businesses.
nice. Any other questions for Mr. Thompson? So I will, and this is absolutely a setup for you, Mr. Thompson. But speaking of zoning, I don't know if zoning was a big issue for the property really close to the London Lane Firehouse, but do you want to take the opportunity to, I know it was in the newsletter, but people watching this are going to be keenly aware of economic development in even the South Leg off of Century. And just if you want to talk about the ponds and
Sure.
give folks an update from staff's perspective on where that sits today.
Sure. Thank you. It's a good one. So Ramsey County owns the ponds at Battle Creek, the golf course. Century, so Century in Lower Afton. That's kind of the intersection
Yeah,
south
all
there.
the way
just-
down to Lake.
All the way down, yeah, and south of the correctional facility. So Ramsey County owns that land. It's operated as a public golf course. They are proposing, as part of their biennium budget, they do 2-year budgets, to close that golf course, or it's in their budget proposal to close that, and then potentially sell the land, potentially for development. So again, I think the key messages for the city have been, it's a Ramsey County-owned park, it's their operations, and it's their proposal as part of their budget process to do that closure. The city's aware of it. We've pushed the county to engage the community that's impacted immediately and larger community that could be impacted by that closure. And they are, again, because they're making it part of their budget process, there is a public hearing. I don't have the date in front of me. They will be holding a public hearing for their budget, and then they'll be considering the closure as part of that budget process. I think it's in December. So that decision is really the county board's. How the city is impacted is, it is obviously in our jurisdiction, we have land use and development control over that site. It is currently guided in our comp plan for park use. And so that's kind of the future vision we see for that site. If the county were to make the decision to close it and sell it for development, we would obviously have more conversations about any sort of development that's on that site and what the community engagement process would be moving forward. But we're not doing any work on that because it's really the county's decision at this point on the future of the golf course.
But if the county were to move this forward, what I think I want the public to know is, first, there would need to be public meetings to address any changes in zoning, right? So before they could rezone it from open space and parkland, because developer's not going to buy it just to keep it as open space, there would need to be public meetings around that. Then if a developer was going to put a development there, there would be additional public meetings for neighbors about what that development would be, again, if it goes to that point. I think the other thing is, and I don't know the numbers, and I'm not sure if you do, Mr. Thompson, but if you look at the wetlands maps and stuff like that, there's a fraction, I don't know if it's a third or a quarter of that space that's actually developable anyway because of all the wetland designation on that space. So, absolute worst case, if everything moved forward, it's not like you're going to see just one big block of multi-unit housing from, Lower Afton to Lake, that there's a limited amount of land there that could be developed. Am I fairly accurate in my interpretation?
We haven't looked at it in that much detail. I suspect it's definitely, I would say maybe at most a third is probably protected wetland, just
Okay.
at a higher level. There's
Oh,
certainly
true.
upland area. But again, we just adopted our comp plan. We made no changes to that site as part of our comp plan. I think the north end and other areas of the town are indicative of the community engagement we do when we look at amendments to our comp plan. We would be looking for a similar process should any sort of future changes be contemplated for that area.
Cool. So stay tuned, but there will be plenty of meetings before anything happens. You'll have plenty of opportunity for input.
For sure.
Cool. All right. With that, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. I am reading 7:28 on the clock. Our meeting is adjourned at 7:28.